Right. Good evening, everyone. Someone mentioned quite recently that there'd been a couple of photo specials where they specifically set off down the line to take photos, and in the second case, take film, which was the Railway Roundabout film that appeared in the 60s. And we thought we can probably string something together and put it out. There's quite a few details that at least I find interesting. And just as an opener, we just put this one up because when River Earth was first completed, they got word to Mary Fair and said, we're going to bring it up to Earton Road for you to photograph. So that's that one. So we're just getting people into the
There we are. Okay.
waiting room.
Hang on. It's on to this. There you are.
Yeah, right. So the first one we're having a look at is basically just two photographs, but they're a sort of preamble to the one we're going to do in 1920. And this, we think, is late 1916 into 1917, because they've got rid of the Staunton Manor Railway on the tender, and it's now NGR, and it hasn't yet had its falling over episode. Interestingly, there are at least two, if not three, of the Bassettlock four-wheel coaches with doors on, and we know two came from Staunton Manor with Colossus, John Anthony as it was then, but we have definitely counted at least four that we've got, so we don't know where the others came from. So this is just setting off from Ravenglass, nice classic pose, Jack Lister driving, and you notice at the back there's the car type hood on one of the four-wheelers. And
Jack Lister, he was the 3-foot gauge driver, wasn't
yes,
he? Yeah.
Yeah. So he then rejoined the new railway. So there are only two photos in this sequence, so I am cheating a bit. But this is the return of that particular trip at what they used to call Prospect Point. We now call it Rock Point. And you can see the canvas covering, which looks a bit more substantial than the sunshades that they had previously. So we're guessing that was probably installed at Staunton Manor. If Howie had cars to spare, he may have had coverings to spare. But it's nice sharp shot. So he was obviously working on it to lead up to it. But we've also got two colorized versions of these, and the first one is blue, which is what we think it was to start with, and then we have it in red, and how accurate they were, we can't be sure. So then in May 1920, Everyday Science, which was what models, locomotives and railways turned into, but which Greenlee was still inputting stuff. And this actually demonstrates beautifully how disconnected he was with the Ratty. It was going to be another year before he actually arrived at the Ratty, because he's got Sir Aubrey down as a 442 and always keen to blow his own trumpet. The details are identical with the larger Atlantic type, which is my loco, basically. So it does say in early June, and although the Sir Aubrey was built in 1919, we now think that this was one of the first official trips and we'll show you why we think that in a minute. So there we are, Proctor Mitchell sitting in as driver and looking good. Now this one most people will recognize, and there's lots of little bits and pieces of detail. From our viewpoint, just to tie all these photos together, there's a gentleman in the first compartment with a straw bow tie. And for our convenience, in the back compartment is another gentleman that we've called Mr. Beard. We still don't know who he is, but he's good for spotting. Second thing to notice is the lack of trees at this point, because Bassetloke is up on the abutment to Rock Point, just before Earton Road, and looking back towards Wart Mill. And the third, and probably most obvious to us, is that Colossus is following on site. And that's why we believe that it was a test run and they weren't 100% convinced. So they had to have the backup loco with them. But that's definitely Colossus. The other interesting thing is on the backs of some of these particular postcards, there were cards that were sent presumably in a letter and just notes added. So if I just go back one, he's saying the fell in the background is Muncaster Fell. And then it's not particularly PC, but it does say where I got the hawk's eggs, and presumably they're the peregrines that were round and about. We think we know the identity of the sender, but I'll save that for a moment. And then we go back to the F. Moore colorized version, which got into probably half a dozen books. They did it so well. And it does sort of bring it up and make it sparkle. Then they moved the train on to the other side of Blackbridge, and he managed to get a photo from there. You'll see Mr. Beard is third from the right in the back compartment. We'd love to know who he is because he appears in quite a few other pictures. Then we'll still have to go back again, and it says preview of Eskdale. The two dots, which we can't see at the top of the shot, show two trees which I have orders to fell. So it's beginning to look as though he worked for the company. And the two trees are directly above the loco as you start to go around the corner, and they're left and right of the track. So those are the two trees he was talking about. And the special Bassetloke must have got back on, and it arrived in Earton Road. And again, we have a comment on it, which is, this is some of our timber at Earton Road Station. Try the right button. I'm a little bit dubious about whether a moped type scooter would pull two wagons full of timber. That is a fair weight for something that just bolts onto a bicycle, basically. So
it's a good pose if it's not, though.
Yes. Peter thinks this is still the Wall auto wheel scooter, and we have another reference from someone who wrote a piece in Model Engineer in 1920, and he also said they went for a ride on the Wall auto wheel. He took his wife and child for a little run up and made the point quite forcefully that you have to be careful how you mount and dismount, because if the front people jump off in excitement. The person at the back goes backwards. So that's his timber. Then we had, this was the fourth one, and looking at the writing, we think it says "Love from Walter." And at the time we had an engineer who later became the driver of Rivermite 1 called Walter Burney. And we're pinning our hopes on that's who it was. Back to the trip, and they move up as far as Spout House. And once again, we have the confirmation because the man with the straw boat is sitting at the front. When you zoom in, you can actually see Mr. Beard at the back. And this is a shot that was very popular for a while. We probably have 20 odd photos of this. And if memory serves, the tree on the left, just at the end of the train, is the one that was taken down a few years ago by our track gang and assistants. I think it's the same one. It's in about the right position. Evening, Di. So once again, he stayed on the bridge. They moved the train forward. And this is another shot that's appeared in many books. Once again, conveniently for us, Mr. Beard's in the back compartment, and you can actually see the man in the straw boater. So it does give us a little bit of confirmation. And then this being 1920, and the point just before they extended to Delgarth cottages, they started work on the cottages in May 1920. And there's this intermediate period where we think all passenger trains stopped at Beckfoot.
Do you not think it arrived at the time that the opening took place to Beckfoot? Sorry, to Delgarth, which was
no,
early July.
that was August. That was August the 12th. Oh no, that was
June,
that was
July.
later.
Sorry.
They started work on the cottages. They got the official go-ahead in May 1920, 1st of May. I would think that if this was a trip that was opening the cottages, Basset Light would have had a photo of it. We have later photos,
Yeah,
23.
that's reasonable. Yeah, except that when was the opening to Delgarth? July.
Delgarth proper was
Delgarth cottages as Delgarth.
We don't know.
Yeah, I think the timetable is July, and we'd have to look.
Right.
But there is a timetable.
Yeah.
Of that period.
They must have been close.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, the interesting thing to note is if you have a look at the condition of the sleepers, they are 3-foot sleepers. And if we go on to the next shot where Bert is actually leaning backwards, it's a better picture. And you can actually see some of the fixings on the end of the 3-foot sleepers, but they are a bit ropey. And we don't appear to have had an awful lot of ballast at this point. Then because Colossus was following on as the safety engine on site, Basset Loak seemed to have taken a picture in almost the same place. I don't think he moved the camera. I think they just moved the engines. And Bob Hardy is sitting in as driver. Yeah.
It shows what the ravages of 3 years work or 4 years work on this railway does to an engine though, doesn't it? From that picture early on when it was pristine, and it's already looking quite, it's presentable, but it's careworn, isn't it?
Yeah, this was
Well,
after it had fallen over as well.
Several trips a day, some of the years, I mean, this was the thing when the scooter appeared. It took mileage
They
off
did
the
a lot.
steam engine.
Yeah.
But even the little scooter, but you know, they were running a daily service, Christmas Day included. I mean, the interesting thing with the sleepers you mentioned, of course, is that at the ends and the middles, you had fan bolts going all the way through. So it wasn't just ripping a dog out to move your rail. You to damage, and you've got this thing glued on. And we've got so many of them because there were
You see them,
two either side at the ends and the middles.
Yes, yeah. And obviously, for those who haven't studied the early ones too much, the strange contraption, the extension to the front buffer beam, is actually two sandboxes with the covers. Then we were wondering whether we should add in the Casserly negs that we acquired recently, but to be fair, and going on our original description, it was just a trip on a scheduled train. We will move forward to a special that wasn't necessarily a photographic special, but had lots of photographers on it, which was the RCTS visit on the 4th of September 1960. And there were lots of gentlemen around and lots of cameras around. And the reason I've put them in is I've found some color versions. So this is the special up at Urton Road. We think the gentleman directly behind the coal in the tender is Billy Wilson, because he appears as a sort of additional guard in quite a few of these shots. So we're fairly sure it's him.
Was he a staff guard?
No, he was actually the joiner.
Right, okay.
It was he who erected Delgas Station hut in 1926 as a temporary measure.
Sometime they were gold mining.
Oh yes, he went off. He went off to West Africa, and came back.
Quite an interesting career. And then later on, when he retired, he took up painting, because there was a lady doing painting. And at that clearance, there were a wall full of naive, I'm saying, not criticising, but that naive, miners naive, rather, of paintings. And they must be all over. And they were of local things.
I don't think we have any in the archive.
They just disappeared. I've never seen a single one since.
So after
just before you go off that one, Die Pickup's also sat in the first carriage.
Oh yes, he is.
Yeah, and then further back 2 or 3 people, chap stood up there, and possibly the bloke to his right could be some of the early Kendal lads. That could possibly be the chap stood up, and the chap sat next to him on the right could possibly be Preston Whiteley.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's something else to chase.
Certainly Mr. Pickup.
Yes, I honestly hadn't spotted Di. And what was the other guy's name?
It's possibly Preston Whiteley. He's got a look of him.
Yeah. It's not a name you should forget, really. Unusual. Right, just scribbling that down.
Would be able to confirm, wouldn't
yes.
They'd have a...
Yeah, we can follow up, because we're putting 1 or 2 appeals out on the company site on the Facebook page. Trying to think what the last one was. Yeah.
Oh, it's sound appeal for the recordings on the.
Oh yes.
The anniversary cassette.
The centenary
Yes.
special cassette. We've got the cassette, and we've got some really nice engine sounds on it, but we don't know which engine. It did mention in the newsletter that there were some recordings of the visiting engines as well at the time, but we haven't got a sheet of details given with it. And it's a sort of classic shot, but almost every time I've seen it, it's been in black and white as they returned with it. So I thought it'd be nice to put the colour on them. And then, yes, then we go to, and I need my notes for this, 15th of October 1960, which is when they actually did the filming for the Railway Roundabout film, which went on out on the Beeb. So it's Patrick Whitehouse and John Adams, and they both had movie cameras, which were obviously mute, and one of them, and I think probably John, had a fairly good stills camera and produced these slides. These are from the wonderful Martin Higginson collection, and I'm fairly sure it's out on YouTube, the Railway Roundabout film. We were trying to get it added into the PowerPoint presentation for tonight, but throughout the day, all of our supplies have been interrupted because the electricians have been trying to figure out what went where and why. So I'm afraid we just didn't get there. So if you catch it on YouTube, don't believe the sequencing that they edited. So nice little pose for Esk. I'm not sure who the man is in the very large cap behind. And Dan, you know it's still quite early on because the back of the engine shed still has slates on it. So it was a double pitched roof at that point. And the engine shed doors are to the left there.
Or is that the gate?
The gate, yeah.
And I don't know if it's still there, but directly behind the smoke box door is the little alcove where the scales used to be. Yes, they would still be there at that point. They were only taken out later.
Yeah. By the time this pictures are taken, the auction happened, hadn't it?
Yes.
And the railway had effectively just been saved, really, hadn't
Yes.
it? If
Yeah,
this was
so,
October.
Well,
yeah.
The transfer date would be the 28 days or whatever after the auction.
Yes.
Mhm.
So,
and this was
I'm
very
desperately
much
trying to think of the archives at Carlisle. I've got the signed, stamped piece of paper.
Oh yes.
But it literally
the copy.
contemporary. What?
The copy, because it's a copy of the contract. If you look on the front page, down the bottom it says copy.
Yeah,
but everything else is genuine.
It is stamped.
Yes, yeah, everything else is genuine.
So it's a genuine. No, what I mean is it's a genuine copy.
Yes.
Of the
the
were made
contract.
at the time because it's got a stamp on.
And they made it on the auction.
Yeah.
Catalogue.
Oh, did they? Oh,
they actually wrote into that. So yeah, that was all happening. And so we're doing a bit of preparation. The wandering water tank is now to the right there. That's possibly another whole story. If you look very carefully into the alcove, you might see a hint of the scales. They were sort of a bit like a hangman's. So then we go back and couple up. you can't.
Fascinating to actually date it properly, actually, now you've mentioned it, because Keswick would have held on to the rights, i.e.
Yes.
to run the train until the end of their published season.
Yes.
Even though there were aspirations for society, in inverted commas, to run it, they weren't.
They didn't give permission, no, because we've got a letter to that effect.
This potentially is either the last train of the old era or the first train of the new era.
I think possibly more likely the latter, because you can't see them clearly in this one. But the two key people in the transition, Tom Jones, who was still then manager, and Colin Gilbert, do turn up. I'll just flag up, the lady standing behind the first compartment has red hair, and we think that's either Mrs. Adams or Mrs. Whitehouse. And the other lady that's in that little group later on is wearing a headscarf, and it'll become obvious that they were connected. We did think for a moment that the person directly above the "and" in R&ER and the tender might be John Green, but again, it's just very difficult to pull him up. He has the look of John Green, so, and he was tied in with Gilbert, wasn't he, for a while?
Oh yes, I mean the flat hat is the interesting one as well.
Yes, we might get some better shots.
Right.
This is, if you look at the YouTube video, this is quite a good storming run past Lancaster Mill. So presumably Pat was filming it and John took the stills, but it's a really nice still. So they get to Earton Road, and the gentleman on the right with the red jumper is Patrick Whitehouse, and Colin Gilbert is behind the redhead in that first coach. Can't see Tom on that one. On the film, Tom and Colin Gilbert walk off to the right. So this was all part of the preparation.
What's the brass thing sticking out the corner of the cab? Just
The
below his
two
hand.
oil things
Right.
and the lubricator.
The ones that
they had a displacement, big engine displacement lubricator inside the cab, and the innocents would come along and touch it.
Oh, thinking it was a handle.
Depending on what the engine had been doing,
Yes.
this was either stone cold or relatively warm, probably say, or bloody hot to take your skin off. Because what they used to do was set it going basically when the train was progressing up the line, and then you'd adjust it. But they also used to clean out the oil, the old oil, by blowing it out up the bank coming into Ravenglass.
Oh, right, okay.
So there was a slick on the left-hand side of congealed, blown out cylinder. But it was this, it looked so pretty that people would pat it once.
Once. I don't think I've got a date for when it was taken out. It survived the going into black, and I think it may even have survived the new tender.
I don't know it did. I'll tell you for why. The Kirkham lubricator that was on the mitre proved itself by then. And they got, I mean, the photos will prove just exactly what you said.
We are working.
But I'm not actually sure whether Glyn would have had it on the engine.
Yeah, I can't remember. We're working on a timeline, and it's a timeline of changes like that we're working on. So then they progressed to Eskdale Green, and there's obviously quite a debate about the next couple of sequences, because they did 2 runs up Hollinghow Bank, That again is Pat Whitehouse with his back to us. And the lady to the right, so the first passenger in the black coat, has now got a headscarf on, and she appears up at the water tank. So this was presumably the first run that they did. So they belted up and then Dick backed it down again. And then they did a second run. And on this one, to the right of the lady with the black coat and the headscarf, you can just see Tom Jones. He does finally appear. And you can definitely see Colin Gilbert at the back of that coach. So that was the second run. Then they moved on, and you'll find in the film they edited the sequence in after they'd done round Hollinghead Bend, which of course was still there before the cutting. And nice little touch of Rowan behind. Then they got to the water tank, and you can see Pat actually crouching down and filming. And again, they did several takes of it in the film. Dick Long is filling the tank, but you can see him glance up a couple of times to see whether Pat's got enough footage, and then he stops fairly quickly. Then John Adams then climbs up onto the tank. So he's shooting down towards Pat, and Pat is shooting back up. It will become obvious if you see the movie. There's our lady on the right with the headscarf, and our redhead is still there and with Tom Jones behind. So obviously that was the cross shot that they were filming. Then, you have to take my word for it. On the film, Esk takes off from there, and there's a reverse shot from the water tank. They did get to Delgas twice, apparently, because we have another shot of the same train pointing in the same direction, but on track 2. And our nice little redhead lady standing up. Then they did the usual turning around on the turntable. And again, in the film, Colin Gilbert is literally standing right behind with what looks to me like pride of ownership appearance. There we are on track 2. We're not quite sure why. I presume they came in and out a couple of times. That is where we were going to put the film. So then we thought we'd jump forward, because there have been a few photographic evenings and photographic specials, and there definitely was one for Beck. The only drawback for me in particularly the Beck one, is everyone jumped off to take the photos, and they were taking photos of an empty train. But you can see our little posse down on the left, and fairly sure that's a Diane Glover one, and she's just caught the sunlight across. And I think that's special, because again, I can't see any people in it. And that's Will backing down in good ratty style, as with Railway Roundabout, is backing down for another hit at Hollinghow Bank. That's the hit, and that's the empty train. And it's such a shame that it's a nice picture, but with no people on it.
So if we ever do a photo charter again, we either need people or cutouts of people in the train shed.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can sit them on the side.
But isn't that the thing, that the engines and the vehicles don't change much?
But the people
But the one thing that will change between shots over the years is the cars and
Yes.
the people.
Yeah.
And the one thing like you're finding now, isn't it, the interest somehow is in the personalities, people.
Well, yeah, really, it's people that make the history. The engines and everything are of interest, but usually the stories revolve
They're a
around
constant almost.
the people.
Not quite.
I can't remember how many of these I've got. Oh yeah, it's another one slightly further up. I apologize if I'm not crediting the people. So that it did actually make it to the top of Hollinghow Bank. No, this is Spout House, isn't it? I'd put it down as Hollinghow, but it is Spout House. So obviously stopped and run again. And just to prove that there were photographers at our photographers' evening, David Mark went into the shed and caught them. And that's another shot, shall we say. He did at almost the same time.
There are people on the train on that one as well.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, that's because they were walking, I think, between shots.
Ah, right, okay.
Oh, and again, and this has a nice little echo, because if you remember back to the Bassett Loke Sir Aubrey special, although the train's going in the opposite direction, that's the same shot as we had right at the start, looking towards Earton Road from Blackbridge,
So
left-hand abutment.
The dome cover's about Mr. Beard then, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The trees have grown.
Yeah, the trees, again, I mean, even looking that way, the trees have sprung up again. This, I believe, is one of David Mart's without camera people in it, and he does take some lovely pictures. I don't know what number we're on. Does it say? Anyway.
No, I don't know.
Just have to bust it. And again, I mean, you know, people comment on the difference with digital photography, but my goodness, it's so sharp that it could almost be a cardboard cutout put into the scenery. I just think they're lovely. This would be one of our evening photographic specials, and I've got a name against it of Jacob, so I'm hoping it is. This was definitely a museum special, and in fact, if you look to the back of Count Louis, there's a certain person doing an impression of Sir Nigel Gresley at the opening of the Romney, because Sir Nigel had to sit on the tender for that.
Ah, but I was sat on a purpose-made seat, not just on the car.
No, I think so.
Presley, of course, was wearing a three-piece suit. What were you wearing?
But I was reminding Mr. Whitehouse of the one critical rule for double heading: no overtaking.
And is that Henry Greenley with his head sticking out the first coach? Not being introduced to anyone.
He actually, curiously, he looks more like Robin Buttrell, doesn't he? But he isn't, obviously.
No, sadly, it's up to his time,
yes,
so to speak. Yeah.
which is a shame. So I've completely lost my place. So this is the same special up at the top, and it was actually quite a useful operation because the locos were left up by the turntable. So we got lots and lots of pictures, nice pictures, because it was nice and sunny, and lots of cars spotted them as they were driving past. So there was quite a few near accidents. Oh, look! Yes. Now this is a Is it the same?
No,
No,
it's
it isn't,
different
because we've
coaches.
got opens on. And I think this is coming back down towards Mulcaster Mill. I'm sure Christopher will help.
Mm.
And I think Peter's at the helm of St Alder on that one.
Yes, it looks like it. There's Invisible Man driving Count Louis. And again, I thought it would actually be quite sneaky to put this in, because it's a photo of David Mart rather than one of David Mart's photos. But you can see they've laid out some lamps to encourage better shots. Now this I think is by Peter Trimming, and Peter again takes some really cracking pictures. The point we're making now is that it is possible to take really nice pictures when it's not a photographic charter, so long as you're doing it under controlled conditions. So you must talk to the controller before you do it, and you must be careful about trespass, because not all the land alongside the railway belongs to the railway. I think this is a John Mitchison shot, and again, just happening to be there at the time between the clouds when the sun came out, and just catches it. I think one of the potential problems in this area is that the farm track to Hollinghow is a private road. And although we're probably okay up to the bridge,
it is a public footpath
all the way up.
Yes.
All right.
So you can you can do a circuit if you
Not
wish.
in the grounds of the farmyard,
right.
it goes round the farmyard.
Yeah, there's quite a poignant sign at the farmyard, giving you no doubts that you're not to go in the farmyard.
Yeah.
In the biggest letters possible.
Yeah,
But you can walk up there.
Yeah, sort of put that, because this field, we definitely still own the barn. Do we own the field?
No, we own a little bit round the barn. The fence posts may be in. There's sufficient round the barn. There's always been an aspiration that it turns into a camping barn at some point.
Wasn't that where Lord Wakefield was going to keep his lions and tigers at one
point? Well, maybe.
As part of the linear zoo.
He negotiated with the guy who then owned the farm to have goats. And sorry, the man who owned the farm at the time had got goats, and I think he was milking and breeding. But Lord Wakefield thought it was a good idea that these should come out during the off-season and graze the line side to keep it down. The problem then was that the goats were so used to not being either side of the tracks that they decided to just graze where they'd always grazed. Meanwhile, when the train slowed down, the passengers in the train petted the goats. And so there's even more encouragement for the goats to spend less time in the field and more on the line side.
Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, the Peter's referring to the goats. It was Roger Haslam, Peter. Yeah. But the field and the barn we own, I think it's about 30 foot from the Valley Road, and there are still some, I think Peter's just referred to them, there's still some marker posts in the field to mark where our boundary is.
Right. That's lovely. Thanks, Trevor. So there might be another John Mitchison, but I'm not sure. But it's just a cracking shot, just catching the light.
Digital does bring the sky out.
Yes.
In a way that film didn't.
Well, in quite a few of Mary's, see, we won't go through an archive talk without me mentioning Mary Fair, but we have quite a few of her instructions to the printers, and she says, can you bring the sky out?
Right, okay.
And make a point of the clouds. There I've got my mention in. I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be crediting, but again, you know, just enjoy some nice pictures. I'm just saying when we run out.
Well, that was in 2020.
Yes, no one shouted lamp. Now, that's below the cottages, is it? Are they the cottages in the far distance?
Yes, so you're down off the edge, so the lawn in is up to the left, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Michael's posse's little way into the fields.
Makes a slight different framing. And then I always stick this one in because I really like it. It's the same thing again. You've got the light just catches everything.
Is that a Fielding?
It may well. I think it
isn't
is.
it?
Yes.
Yeah, the Mark Fielding.
Which could mean that the next one is the last. And that's a Sol Johnson one. And it's, although the strimmers have been in and actually put things back, it does look quite nicely mature now. There are not too many bare rocks and things. And I think, oh no,
You've got more.
I've slipped more in. That's the problem with trying to be efficient and actually printing out a list and then adding to them on the day. So this is obviously the triple header special, and this is not from the line side. This is a guard who's taken that, but it does work well on that shot. And again, there's quite a few people around. Were you involved in that? Was it actually planned to stop and take photos?
There's no close coaches on it. It must be a special.
Yeah.
It was an evening jolly, I'm sure, on the Saturday night of the gala.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Robert. Can you remember the year, just offhand?
Not offhand, but I think I've got some photos of it somewhere.
May Gala 2008. It was the Monday night. It was the last train of the gala.
Right. That's brilliant. It means I can add a bit more information. Some of it, of course, may already be there, and I just haven't written it down. Oh yes, that's right. Because it's the Romney Eskdale Paxman, and the final shot, which I know it is a lineup, which I thought was suitable with our southern friends tuning in.
3 northerners and only 1 southerner.
So that sort of brings us to the end. It would have been a little longer had we been able to add the video, but I can only apologize and suggest that I'm fairly sure it's on YouTube. Oh,
we've got messages there.
Yes,
let's see
right.
What's there. So what was the reason for the wagon between the tender and front coach?
It was indeed a luggage carrier. Quite often people were traveling with luggage because they were coming up to the Stanley Gill Hotel, particularly in the cooperative holidays, association
you,
days.
you wonder if it was more Saturdays than other days, if you
Yes.
know what I mean.
Yeah, because that
People
would
coming
be
in
change
for
of the
that
day.
change of the day.
Yeah.
But there were several of them.
Yes, some of them were Hayward flats with tops, and of course they also doubled up by adding seats to the tops. There was a fixed and plank version in the 20s. Any idea how many in the early days?
How many round trips did they do in the early days? Is what Ryan's asking.
So that would be early 20s.
They must be doing, depending on the number of engines in operation. I mean, it's whether they've got enough engines to match the timetable. By the time the 20s came, the petrol engines were actually adding to a considerable amount of the mileage. So the petrol engines did wallop the mileage. You're in that period, I think, between the mail starting. But even then, there were times when there weren't many trains running, and they were somewhat difficult to run. They'd be doing 2 or 3, I would think.
Yeah, if you remind me, Ryan, I've got someone copied out one of Nash's timetables that he wrote up in either 1923 or 24. And I'll dig it out if you remind me.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
And then something's on DVD, which could be the Railway Roundabout film.
Yes.
And Ryan's commented on the interesting looking coupling adapter on Esk's front hook. Well,
is that the old?
It had that more like a bar and pin coupling for a long time, didn't it?
It was a special coupling that would take both the Hayward couplings and your ordinary bar couplings. And it survived until it vanished in a skip, I think. It was going to be, I think somebody had intimated it might be useful to fit it to Perkins. And somebody might have decided they didn't want to fit it.
Yes, I have got some copies of George's negs. Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure it was from you.
And Will Tilson's shared a YouTube clip of the Railway Roundabout footage
for
people to go and investigate. And Mark Harrington.
Should we flag that up so that people can see it?
Yeah, so if people look in the comments, they should be able to see Will's link there to YouTube.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Will.
I will try and share it to the museum YouTube bit as well. And Mark Harrington's pointed out that Esk didn't have the builder's plates on when it was green.
Then, because it got them later. And they were the Yorkshire engine, the round ones.
Oh, were they? Right.
Yeah, if you see if it's a perfectly round plate, once it came back with the double engine, tender, powered tender, it ended up with Yorkshire engine monikers. And it's interesting because it kept those into the preservation era, didn't it? I'm trying to think now. Because the current plates were done by a gentleman from Yorkshire, and they didn't appear until 67, 8.
That sounds.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember when they came.
There's one for you there from Mike.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then what have we got, Ryan? Can we do a photo evening again this season? Well, you never know, Ryan. Things could happen. And there's quite a keen following of that idea. And Mark Harrington has spotted himself in a carriage somewhere.
Second picture.
Count Louis. And we can go back to that. And Andy's commented about the headboard size, and it's fitted. It's smaller than a Romney one, and fitted slightly lower.
Yeah, they normally fit on the top lamp bracket.
Yeah.
That one looks like it's perhaps not sitting on the front rail. It's much smaller though.
Yeah, it looks like it's just hanging off it.
I think it's the one that came back with a certain black engine from its last one of his visits.
Yeah, possibly. Yes.
And we'll see if we can find the Count Louis one. That must be it with the opens.
With the opens.
Is that
yeah. Just point out, I think that's me and my mum sat behind Sonalda. So that's why I wanted to see that.
All right.
I think that was from 2011. It was the same year we had the Fell Fire.
Oh yes, yeah. Hang on, I'm still scribbling.
Where's Count? Where's Count Louis at the moment? Have we lost track of her?
Is it not tight?
It's in Andy Walton's workshop, I think.
All right.
Andy,
Yeah, he's at Andy Walton's
Andy Walton's
workshop at the moment.
I'm trying to think what it was waiting for.
Last time I saw it, it was Evesham about 12, 13 years ago.
Ah, well, that's right. It left there and it's currently having some work done at Andy Walton's in not quite Walsall, but just north of Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
But they do like to take it places. So I suspect when it's up and running again, it'll appear.
That's right.
Yeah.
Have you guys all seen the film of it at Zabrowski's at Higham House in 1924?
Yes,
Yeah,
is that the
with the acting in it?
yes.
Fine.
With the damsel in distress on the tender, and then you see Zabrowski and we think his chauffeur standing with her unconscious at the doors to Higham House, and they toss a coin and one of them carries her off into the building, but we not quite sure who won the toss. Fabulous film.
Something else has appeared in the chat. Count Louis is going to a new railway at Tyseley once it's laid.
All right.
Yes. Excellent. We've had a bit of information tonight, Dave.
Yes, yes, all good stuff.
There we are. It's a nice picture to finish on that as well, isn't it? Yes. So